Surrounding Oregon Live's Feast Fiesta, if you will. We're super psyched to be presenting Vegetables Are the New Black. We're also pretty excited to have Michael Russell out in the public eye. He's been an anonymous restaurant critic here for 6 years, I think, total, and he actually started off at the sports desk before that, too. So he's out of the pantry and ready for everyone on there, too. He's got a really cool lineup going tonight. Without any really further ado, if he's nearby, I'm going to make him come out and introduce the guests. Yeah, maybe. We'll see. Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Russell.
Hey, welcome. Sorry, I thought we'd be able to hear in the green room. Sean, when I call them out, could you just give them a holler?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, so before you ask, can I take this? Sit down? Okay. Before you ask, yeah, that's non-GMO corn. I figure that's probably your first question. So, all right, so some of the inspiration for this panel that we're on is I've got a friend down in SF named Jonathan Kaufman. He's working on a book called Hippie Food, which is coming out next year. And he keeps sending me these links, photos to passages of books he's reading from these sort of pioneering farm-to-table chefs from the West Coast. They're flying up to Portland or driving up to Portland, and they keep writing back to their friends in San Francisco. Everyone up in Portland's eating horse meat hamburgers. So he keeps sending me these little passages and saying, what the heck is that about? Well, I have no idea, but times have kind of changed in Portland. We're not eating a lot of horse meat hamburgers anymore. We are eating a lot of vegetables. And one of the reasons that I bring up the 70s in my friend's book is that it kind of feels like we're having a little return to that moment, the last time that vegetables were front and center at restaurants. There was a movement to make vegetarian food, or vegetables specifically, the highlight of a meal. So we've got a couple chefs here and a farmer who are probably going to be better at talking about that than I am. One of them, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the first chef. Let's see. Sam Smith is our first chef. He came to Portland with a pretty impressive resume already. There he is. Sam helped open a restaurant called Zahav in Philadelphia, which is, probably the most influential Israeli restaurant in America. And you maybe know him better for his work at a restaurant called Ava Jean's on Southeast Division, where he was chef de cuisine for 4 or 5 years?
3 years.
3 years. At his new restaurant, Tusk, which is a Middle Eastern influenced restaurant, he puts vegetables front and center, much as he did at Ava Jean's. And we were actually born in the same hospital. I found out once upon a time.
Same year, too.
Same year, yeah, 1981. So he's my brother from another mother. Our next guest is Katy Millard. Yeah, Katy's awesome. So I wrote that. Katy was born in Rhodesia, which is no longer a country. It's now called Zimbabwe. And grew up in Mobile, Alabama. She learned to cook in France at some ridiculously rigorous restaurants, the kind of places that I would fail at like 1 hour in. Sam would probably last a few days. Katy lasted how long?
5 years.
5 years, y'all.
Well, not in the same restaurant, but altogether.
Yeah, multiple restaurants. Yeah. That's right.
Multiple restaurants.
After France, she came to San Francisco, landed in Portland. She started a pop-up called Coquine. You might have heard of it. It started on farms, and eventually they opened a little restaurant on Mount Tabor. And that restaurant was our restaurant of the year this year. So congratulations, Katy.
Thank you.
At Coquine, vegetables are also maybe not quite as radically presented as at Tusk, but they are definitely a crucial part of a meal. And Katy does some pretty amazing things with vegetables.
Oh, shucks.
Okay, Katy Millard. Speaking of vegetables, our last guest is Dan Sullivan. Welcome, Dan. Yeah. Hi, Dan. So today was my first day meeting Dan in person. We talked on the phone earlier. It's probably the same for a lot of you, but if you've eaten at some of these restaurants or other ones like May, the Appalachian pop-up, or...
Lovely's 50/50.
Oh, that's a good one.
Ooh, Taste Bud.
Oh,
The American Local.
yes, come on.
Oh, do you want to hear all of them? No, let's not go through that right now. I'm trying to stay a little anonymous.
Probably a question I should have asked you earlier. And, if you've been to any of those restaurants, you've had his vegetables that he grows them on a plot that's just outside the urban growth boundary east of Gresham. He comes to us from Vermont. He's been farming for 14 years. His farm is called Black Locust Farms.
It's a tree, not an insect. I have it tattooed on my arm for ease of showing you.
And I think if you ask Portland chefs, he's probably the biggest star on the stage today. So welcome, Dan.
I don't think so.
Yes.
So my first question for you guys, we're just going to have a little casual Q&A format.
Oh, why, thank you.
Boom. So I lived through the pork belly years here in Portland. How are vegetables cool now? What happened? Sam?
I think people are just seeing vegetables as more of a way to have a complete meal. And before, in the traditional sense of dining, it was more like appetizer, entree, dessert. And so the appetizer, would be whatever. And then the entree would be like a bigger piece of meat. And so now I think there's a little bit more focus on having like a wider range of flavors and a wider range of products. And vegetables just become a part of that meal.
Katy?
I think that vegetables, the evolution has been, we have been on the Portland scene for 4-5 years now, and I think the evolution has been a very long, slow one for far more than 4 or 5 years. But farmers putting themselves forward and communities actually supporting farmers markets and making farmers markets an integral part of a community. And there's a crazy statistic, and I'm not going to try and quote it because I'll completely bastardize it, but the number of farmers markets 20 years ago compared to the number of farmers markets today is like, in the United States, is like 200 compared to 6,000 or something ridiculous. So I think that the fact that maybe vegetables and fruits have become more important to American diners and diners in Portland, and a populace as a whole has allowed chefs to kind of use those ingredients and use those products and not be seen as outliers, to more be seen as someone using the ingredients from the area. Alice Waters was obviously a pioneer in the whole movement of the farm to table movement. And so people like that have given us the opportunity and made vegetables more mainstream and made vegetables something that are seen as not just like a side ingredient on a plate and actually seen as something, a palate and something to support and something to get excited about. So, Alice Waters was the 70s, like that. It's just been a really, really, really long time. And maybe the reason that it's exploded so much is because people hold it dear now, and then social media. I think that has a lot to do with it too, is prominent chefs all over the country putting these things forward, and vegetables are pretty. Fruits are pretty.
Yeah, and
they make nice pictures.
I should say, I don't mean to discount all the farm-to-table restaurants in between. I just feel like right now I'm seeing a lot of restaurants that are opening that are treating vegetables a little bit differently than they were before.
True.
The 90s were really sort of peak farm-to-table in Portland. You had Higgins opening just a block away from here, Vitaly Paley opening Paley's Place. But I don't know that the emphasis was obviously on using local farms and making those connections. But, what we're seeing right now is a tiny bit more radical. We're seeing menus that are purposefully sort of guiding you toward eating more vegetables and treating meat secondary, if there's even meat on the restaurant at all, on the menu at all. There's even a restaurant that's a vegan tasting menu on Morrison. There's no meat or dairy. So yeah, not discounting the 90s. I'm just saying I'm seeing something from the 70s coming back.
You know,
only in the mainstream.
I was thinking about this actually earlier today because I assumed you might ask that question. But I was thinking about it, and I think that maybe one of the reasons that now vegetables are can be the forefront of a menu is because of maybe a little bit of the drift away from French cuisine as everybody's main inspiration. You know, not to say French people don't use vegetables. They do. There's lots of potatoes and and green beans. There's lots of vegetables, but I think that, you know, French cuisine is very protein focused and very egg focused and very much rooted in classics that have been around for a long time, and those techniques are very important. I don't mean to say that they're not important, but I think that, you know, the era of every nice restaurant being a French restaurant is gone. It's kind of done, and Spanish chefs and Italian chefs and people that inspire me and that are more inspiring maybe to chefs today use more vegetables in their cuisine. I think maybe that might be.
Let me throw that original question back out to Dan. How are vegetables? Why are vegetables cool, Dan?
You know, I have no idea. I've always been fascinated by vegetables myself. I grew up with a garden, grew up in southern Vermont. Everyone grows a little bit of their own food. I spent a lot of my childhood wandering on the farm that I eventually worked on for 8 years, inspired the name of my farm now. So I would say I'm kind of an outlier in society. I don't know. I went for farming. A lot of people seem to go away from farming. It's been like, when I was working on the farm in Vermont as an 18-year-old, my boss only grew very traditional New England vegetables, and that kind of bored me because I need something kind of new and exciting. So I was always like, dude, why don't we grow some of this crazy stuff in the Johnny's catalog? Why don't we grow any of this interesting stuff? He's like, Dan, I'm trying to make money so I can pay you. That stuff doesn't sell. And I didn't believe him. I came out here in the early 2000s to try going to school, which I did go to, did graduate from. It wasn't my big focus. I still wanted to do vegetable farming, but I was left with the impression of Portland that people were into cutting edge vegetables, but farms, we didn't know about all this stuff. I'm wearing a shirt right now called From Wild Garden Seed. This is one of my main seed sources, and in the 90s, these guys are just really getting going, and I source a lot of my seeds from other small local farms that grow seed and breed vegetables that are like for chefs. They're flavorful. They're not just commodity produce. So like from the farming world, we've been working towards this, and we are all wicked excited that people finally are seeing that like the vegetables are exciting. So that's cool. But like as far as like Portland goes and the restaurant scene, I'm just excited that people are buying my produce and that I can farm.
Well, I think getting back to that question too is like, why are they cool? Because of people like Dan, honestly. Like, I mean, the kind of excitement that he brings and like what you're saying, like wanting to grow things that you're excited about, not just for like selling that people already want, but like growing like more original things and more exciting varieties that gets us excited about it. And I don't think we're really seeing that from a lot of other products. And so like when you're bringing this excitement to the table about like here's the fenugreek greens, or here's you know, this variety of carrot, or like the melon or whatever it is, it's like that excitement carries over to us, and then if we're doing our jobs right, that excitement's carrying over to the customer as well.
But it's like, even so when I was growing up in the 80s, the first fresh fig I tasted, I was 19 in New Orleans. Like, I had no idea fresh figs were even, I didn't know what it was. I asked my chef, there's a flat of figs. I'm like, oh wow, what's that? And she said, it's a fig. I was like, no, it's not. What are you talking about? But it's, so the more prominent farmers markets get, and the more commonplace that kind of thing is, the more people are going to realize that green beans don't just come from a can. And I mean, the peas that I grew up with were Lazure peas. I don't know if you guys know what that is. They're in this little silver can, and they're tiny, and they're like gray, and they have no flavor. And same thing, I didn't taste a fresh shelling pea until I went to France. I was 22, you know? And I have a little boy.
Plug for Hugo. That was a plug.
He's 2, and he eats shelling peas and sugar snap peas and all these things that I didn't even know existed until I was, again, like 21, 22, you know? So I think that the availability of it, and the fact that we're all a product of our environments, and who doesn't get excited about, just the 20 kinds of peppers that you can buy at a farm stand now, and they're beautiful and they're super flavorful, and maybe people don't quite know what to do with them, but they're here now. They're there now. There's figs everywhere. Like, there weren't figs everywhere 10, 15 years ago, and I don't know. That's my take.
I'm not going to hammer on the 70s thing because I could be way off base on that. But I will just point out that Tusk, that's Sam's restaurant, is named for a Fleetwood Mac album. So there's that, and it's from the 70s.
Yeah.
Katy brought up Alice Waters, and I think that you could draw some interesting comparisons between Chez Panisse, Alice Waters' Berkeley restaurant, and Katy's restaurant, Coquine. And also the 70s was a time when a lot of organic farmers got their start. Dan, you mentioned that on the phone today.
Yeah.
And it was also the time that gave rise to farmers markets. So one of the things I was curious about, given that earlier generation did give rise to farmers markets, which play such an important role in a lot of the way, we live our lives, whether it's visiting Saturday's big one or one in your neighborhood, what do you think would be a sort of ambitious big idea for the current generation? Like what would you guys like to see come out of this movement toward vegetables, other than the simple idea of people eating a few more vegetables?
That's a hard question.
Yeah, that's a hard question.
I mean, maybe this isn't. I would say like getting people to cook more at home, because I know like for we're all talking about like we're chefs and Dan's a farmer, and we want people to be excited about, what we're doing at our restaurants. But for me, if I'm successful, I want people to come in and eat the food that we're doing and get excited about that food and be like, I want to make something for myself. I want to go to the market and get things and cook for myself. And so for me, that's like the next big thing, is not just to get excited about the idea of vegetables or the idea of restaurants or the idea of like what chefs are doing at all these cool places, but it's like actually taking that excitement and bringing it home with you. And
would you ever consider like giving a recipe with a dish? Like, here's how to make this at home.
I mean, I think for sure. And we get requests like for dishes, but I think a lot of like what I want people to get excited about is that you don't have to follow a recipe, and like taking something and really being able to make it your own. And so if you come in, and even if it's just like, oh, I had like the best melon I've ever had in my life at Tusk, and then going to the market and like wanting to like find a great melon, and then like doing something that's like a little bit more personal.
I was going to say a similar thing, but with seeing people growing a little bit of more of their own food, there's a lot of pressure on me and like people like me to grow a lot of food, but I'm just one person. I have a 2-person farm. And I'd love it to be a little bigger, but as I said about growing up in Vermont, people grew a lot of their own food there. And I know that people in Oregon, I lived in rural Oregon, and people grow some of their own food. But I just think having a connection with your food in that level, and I hope that there's just more reverence for food in general, because it's pretty. I mean, I get very amazed when my winter squash is ready. It's like this thing that can keep for 6 months in my house, and I grew it. And like I grow greens. I grow 30 lettuce harvests a year, so I'm not as. It doesn't impress me as much as seeing the squash finish, or like my onions and my shallots finish, and it's a similar kind of thing. And I think having that experience when I was a kid really set me on this path of food awareness, and I hope that that's getting out there, and I hope that I see more of that. Yeah.
I think for me, something that would be, it's maybe not so radical, but in the 90s and the 2000s, and even nowadays, everybody, or not everybody, but a lot of people who are very interested in cooking, my dad included. My dad bought an immersion circulator. Everybody has gotten very into molecular gastronomy and hydrocolloids and and immersion circulators and combi ovens and these techniques and scientific approaches to food. I think that for me, what I would see as something kind of radical is maybe a step away from that, and people that get excited about preserving food and fermenting food and growing their own food, and techniques that seem ancient because they are ancient, because that's how everybody has fed themselves on this planet for so long. But I feel like we've kind of we've drifted away from that in a big way because, we don't need to. We don't need to get through a 6-month winter anymore. But so the interest that I see in people taking a little bit more interest in getting back to growing something and taking it and making it more digestible or making it more palatable or making it a storage vegetable, how to make things keep for a long time. I think that for me, that would be really refreshing to see people get excited about is, the fact that, and you can do it for meat too, curing meat and salting meat and those kind of things. But the fact that vegetables could and should be the bulk of what we eat because they could and should be the bulk of what we grow. And because it takes 60 days to get a lettuce, whereas how long does it take to grow a cow? It's the fact that could be seen as normal again, instead of a steak with some potatoes and some green beans being seen as normal, would be really refreshing to me.
I think what we're all saying is having people get back in touch with the actual process and instead of losing touch with it. And
yeah, for sure.
I have a few individual questions. I'm going to throw them out to each of you, but then feel free to jump in on each one. I'll start with Dan. Hey, man. You're like a long way away.
Yeah. At least you got mics.
I feel like we're like the Eagles, like acoustic here. We're all in a row. I can't actually see anyone but Sam here. All right. This actually came to me while we were in the green room. I'm just curious about, different farms have different avenues for selling their produce. You might go to a grocery store. You might sell a lot through the farmer's market. In your case, I haven't seen your books, but I assume a lot of your stuff goes to restaurants.
I would say 95%.
I'm just curious, what is walk me through why you decided to take that route versus the other 2 or 3 or 5 different avenues farmers have to sell their produce.
You want the short version?
Give me the
mid version.
Yeah,
it's been a lifelong goal to sell to restaurants for me. Honestly, I think it started when I was about 11. The first time that I enjoyed wine with someone who told me about it, and ever since then, it's really been a goal, and it's amazing to me that I've been able to do this now. 2 years ago, I had this opportunity to start leasing my own space, and I just jumped on it because it seemed like the fastest route to ever get this selling to restaurants. But I moved out here in 2011, drove out in an $800 Volvo, and I said to myself, I want to be selling vegetables primarily to restaurants. I took a job at Gathering Together Farm, and the reason I took it was because I was going to get to run their Portland Farmers Market. And the guy I worked for in Vermont, Jack Mannix, who's taught me almost everything I know about farming and marketing, really, and he always told me that I needed to learn how to market stuff. And he never let me work in his farm stand to sell anything. I was tractor guy, I did all the picking, whatever. But I listened to all the advice he gave me, and I really got to try that out at the PSU market with the people I like talking to the most were chefs. They were super excited about the weirder aspects of growing vegetables than my average customers were. They were looking for something specific and different, and I've always walked the opposite direction of everybody else. So I definitely saw this opportunity here in this city with drawing so many chefs to it.
I think just calling us weird.
What was it about restaurants? What appealed to you about having your produce in a restaurant?
I honestly don't know. I guess I used to want to work in a restaurant, but I think that I couldn't stand to be in the kitchen all the time. I like cooking. It's my hobby. I've gotten a little bit away from cooking as I've run this farm. I'm eating the food still, but prep has gotten a little bit more simple. But I used to spend all my weekends when I had a farm job cooking all weekend and trying to preserve some of the food and put some of the food up. I've been attracted to the restaurant scene, and this was my way that I could get involved. And it was a good timing. It really was. I started this farm, had a couple friends who were starting some pop-ups, a couple people who I heard about starting some new restaurants, and then a few connections with chefs that were very personal for me from my working at PSU. And they wanted to they were going to buy some stuff from me last summer and try what I was doing. And it's just sort of snowballed into the main way that we're making income and the way that I'm trying to move our farm forward. And I may end up taking some other avenues, but at the moment, this is all I can handle. So it's been great.
Is it a financially savvy move as well as being one that you're interested in from age 11?
Don't know yet. I hired a bookkeeper. I know how to bring more money onto the farm than spend. My bosses have always been happy with me as a field manager, but really I have not a lot of business background yet. So I think so. I think it is.
I'm wondering if it's like the first time I saw a story of mine in the college paper, like, is there an element of that, like seeing your vegetables displayed at a really great restaurant?
Oh, it's unbelievable to me. Yeah, it's great. It's very, very awesome. I love going and eating at the restaurants that I sell to. Sometimes I can't believe that this is what I'm doing right now, but it's pretty awesome.
On the flip side, Katy and Sam, what is it about Dan's produce that makes you want to buy it?
It's the best.
Yeah, it's the best. But I think, Dan touched on it a little bit, but I think, he really wants our feedback. And I think like the dialogue, not only with Dan, but a lot of other farmers that we're working with, is being able to have this dialogue about what we're using. And not only, do we want the best, but he wants the best. So being able to sort of have this like mutual relationship where we're talking about what we want, what he wants, what he's excited about, what he's already doing that we like, what we want to see in the future. And so being able to constantly like grow together with what he's growing, what we're making, and getting excited about different things together is like a really, really special thing. I don't think that really existed too much before. I think it was, my experience with a lot of farmers before was that this is what we have, this is what it looks like, and this is what we're selling you. And so it's like, if you're actually a part of the process, it's much easier to get excited about.
There are two things that I'd like to touch on. One of them is that Magnus Nielsen is a very famous chef, but he has something that he said, and I don't know if this is word for word because I certainly haven't memorized it, but it goes something like, everything has merit, but a carrot is never more a carrot than right after it has been pulled from the ground. It's so true. I mean, anybody who's tasted something fresh from a garden and something that's been sitting on the shelves at a grocery store for a week, or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, or, there's no comparison. And as someone who strives for excellence and is a relentless exceptionalist and perfectionist like I am, maybe to a fault, there's no contest. Something that Dan harvests and brings to me literally the next day or 8, 12, 16 hours after he's pulled it from the field, and the flavor. And when you start with that, as opposed to starting with a completely subpar, like wilted, flavorless radish or wilted, flavorless head of lettuce or melon that has no character or there's nothing sexy about it as opposed to something that just like this product that is, I mean, sure, maybe it's still just a carrot, but it's got so much more flavor, and making something as simple as a soup from that carrot versus a carrot that there's something that happens. I mean, maybe you know the chemistry behind it, but like when you cut a vegetable, it stops. There's enzymatic reactions that start happening, and everything just kind of goes downhill. Like the rot that happens in an animal when you kill it, or a fish when you kill it, which is really very quick, as opposed to an animal with 4 legs. But there's something. It just happens, and it's not. I mean, and sometimes it needs it, like you say with winter squash.
Sure.
They need to cure, and they need that flavor development, or they need starches to start getting broken down into sugars. But, the point is, when you're looking to be the best and when you're looking to make the tastiest food, then you have to start with that raw ingredient that is special and delicious and wonderful and beautiful. And the fact that is available to everyone, pretty much. I mean, your stuff's not, but well, it kind of is. I mean, you're at Providor.
Try.
But the fact that is more widely available now than the supermarkets that I grew up with, or what a lot of people we live in a very lovely bubble here in Portland, in the Pacific Northwest, and the fact that that's widely available and that people can get excited about about vegetables and inspired by vegetables because they have that flavor, and you can tell the difference between the flavor of a yellow pepper and the flavor of a red pepper, or a jalapeno and a serrano. And the fact that you can tell those differences now because it's not just canned things, I think that's where it's at.
So there's no dry-aged carrots at Coquine, in other words.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Maybe
Fermented,
January.
yes.
21-day dry-aged carrot, sir.
Pickled,
sorry,
yes.
Sam, I stepped on you.
No, I think just kind of going back to what I was saying before, I think for us, I'm trying to like capture that moment as much as possible. And so if people can come into the restaurant and sort of like feel that excitement and feel that if we're doing our job correctly, capturing that moment and translating that to the guest, and then they're getting excited about it, and whether they can actually get, Dan's specific produce or not, getting excited about that actual thing and wanting to go do it themselves. And
There's
It's
also
huge.
there's something, and again, scientific reasons or evolutionary. We'd have to talk to an anthropologist about it, I guess. But I think that so many years of evolution and so many years of eating within the seasons. Why is a braise more satisfying in the winter, and tomatoes and watermelon are really satisfying in the summer? There's something about like eating things that are seasonally appropriate and things that are fresh and things that are in the moment that is just really deeply satisfying to us as human beings. And we may not, I don't know why, and we may not know exactly why when you come into our restaurant now and you eat one of the salads that's on the menu, that thing is so delicious and it's so satisfying and it's so wonderful. But it's kind of just because it's what's beautiful and wonderful right now.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
Yeah, it's natural. No, I mean, it gave me goosebumps talking about that. It's true. I resist the urge to start eating the delicata right now, but they're ready, and like I can't help it. And I've been throwing them in with my breakfast because they're perfect right now, and they're not the best storage squash. And then I won't start eating the butternut for another couple months. But it's anything that I grow. It's as it's in season, it kind of gives you that feeling like you get goosebumps.
Katy, I'll send this one out to you, but again, jump in afterward. I'm curious, given your time in France, what you learned specifically about vegetable cookery over there, and how it differs from what you do at Coquine, or how it's similar.
Ooh, that's a loaded question.
Mine was easier.
Softball for Dan.
The second job I had in France was at a Michel Trois Gros one-star restaurant right off the Champs-Élysées in Paris. And I was in way over my head, like way over my head. Second or third week I was there was asparagus season, was there. And everybody had asparagus. It was everywhere on every menu. There were cases and cases of it that came in to the restaurant that I worked at. It was very expensive, and it was like this revered product. Asparagus is, I don't even know what you could compare it to here, but it's this thing.
Maybe the Charente?
Yeah, maybe the Charente, yeah. But it's very delicate as well. So cooking, there's a technique to it, and anywhere you go in France, they pretty much have one or a very similar version to the same technique. You peel it, and then you tie it together with butcher's twine, and you blanch it in. Everybody has a ratio of salt in the boiling water, and then you shock it, and then you untie it. It can't rest too long in the string because then it gets the string marks, and it's. But that process, I think, is what has stuck with me. The fact that everybody cares so deeply about this vegetable that it's the first sign of spring. It's what kind of pops up, and it's in Paris. If you're in Paris, which is where I was at the time, then it's the first time you kind of start to see the farmers show up, and there they are, and then the farmers market kind of blows up, and there's all this fresh produce everywhere. But the fact that everybody is so like militaristic about that product and about the care that is taken with it and the respect for it, that has definitely stuck with me. That is, it kills me to burn something or overcook something or in some way waste something, I think, because of that.
But do you feel like there's only one way to cook an asparagus?
Definitely not. No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
But the fact that respect exists. In fact, I did. When I came back to the States, I did think there was only one way to make a chicken
you're
stock.
cooking asparagus wrong.
Yeah, you're doing exactly. What are you doing? And why are you not shocking your green beans? And why are you, But the fact that I went from there to landing in Daniel Patterson's kitchen, where he is completely self-taught and had no French chef inventing wonderful insults for him, breathing down his neck. The fact that he didn't have that, and the fact that the way he cooks is by thinking critically about something and cooking something and tasting it and deciding whether he likes it or not was worlds away from my French training. And it was a revelation to me in a lot of ways was that he didn't shock his vegetables because he didn't want the vegetable to spend more time in water, because then it just leaches out the flavor. So the way I think about vegetables is very much, I think, comes from everything I've ever done and every place I've ever been and what I've seen all over the place. And I kind of pull different things from that. So the respect for product and the fact that everybody takes cooking so seriously, that certainly comes from France, for me. And then Daniel Patterson, genius master that he is, kind of taught me to take a vegetable and think critically about how you want to eat it and what is the best way to prepare it and what is the best way to get from raw product to the end product that you want, even if it's something completely and utterly unprecedented and maybe a little bit illogical,
So just in case you missed a couple of things there, Daniel Patterson is the chef at a restaurant called Croix in San Francisco, a 2 Michelin star restaurant that Katy worked at before moving up to Portland. And Chanteray is...
Charente.
It's my dyslexia steps
it's
up.
It's the melon that I like to grow. It's a heirloom French. Well, it's not an heirloom that I grow, but they are a French cantaloupe. Smooth
in France,
skin.
it's just melon. That's all the melon is Charente.
I don't know its background very well. I'm terrible about all of that. I just know what I like to grow.
And you'll see that at Katy's restaurant quite a bit.
I really enjoy those melons because they have a couple of different cues that you have to use to pick them correctly. So not anyone can just go out and slip the melon off the stem.
What are those cues?
Oh, I'm not going to share that.
Ooh.
Gotta come out and lend a hand.
I'll do that. I'm gonna guess one of them is the smell.
That's my prized knowledge.
I'm gonna guess one of them's the smell.
There's some smell involved, but by the time they smell in the field, they may not make it to the restaurant very well. Although they do make it into my belly very well.
Make it into our
popsicles
popsicles
around the outside of the melon field.
Just sort of something that you were just talking about is Dan is the one that is harvesting all the vegetables for us, or him and his partner.
Yeah.
And that's why we're so excited to work with smaller farms like him, because once you start working with bigger farms, which we certainly do as well, but the chain of hands that a product has to go through from the field to getting to our restaurant, you have however many people picking it, however many people packaging it, the delivery driver, all these things. And so there's all these points where something could slip through the cracks and we could actually get something that maybe isn't as high of a quality as we're looking for. So when we work with farmers like Dan, if he's the one that's actually looking at it, harvesting it, deciding if it's good enough to bring to the restaurant. And so we know that every time we order stuff from him that it's going to be perfect and it's going to be not only up to our standards but up to his standards, which are actually higher than mine. I know sometimes you're like, dude, I wasn't even going to bring you this, and I'm like, I think it's totally good, and you're like I'm like, that looks like an incredible piece of fruit or vegetable, and you're like, no, that's not good enough for me, I'm not bringing it to you, I'm not going to sell it to you.
I'm a perfectionist too, or I strive for excellence.
Holding yourself to those standards forces us to hold not only ourselves but the other people we're getting product from to those standards as well, and I think it's just constantly upping the game. And
back to the question that was asked to me when Katy was talking about the respect that chefs have for vegetables, that is another reason that I really like working with chefs, because I never walk into a restaurant and have them not come and greet me and be stoked about the fact that I basically got 4 hours of sleep the night before so that I could make sure that everything got in to them as good as it felt to me when I picked it. Being a vegetable picker is tricky because you see it when it is perfect every time. And even looking at the produce for me, after it's been delivered, it usually looks really good, but I'll always see something that I think is wrong with it and hope that no one else is seeing that when I delivered it. But I worked at farmers markets for a long time, and it's not that I don't like the relationships that I built there, but you never get the same kind of, it doesn't feel as special, I guess. even when I'm having a hard week on the farm, every time I go visit with my customers, I always go back to the farm feeling really good about what Jesse and I are doing. And so, yeah, anyway, sorry to go back there, but
Shout out to Jesse.
yeah, he won't see his face. He's from really rural Vermont.
Sam, a question for you. One of the things I sometimes hear from people who eat at Ava Jean's is they like how good they feel after eating there. I'm sure if I've heard it, you've heard it
For sure.
10 times more than me. I'm just curious, how much of a role does like diet, in the sense of not like losing weight, but feeling good about yourself? How much does that play a role in what you're doing? And also, just one little addition to there, it doesn't seem like there's any kind of a stigma attached to that. It's just feeling good is feeling good.
It was not super thoughtful, honestly. It was like a little bit of an accident. And I think when you're, using things that are super fresh and nutritious and healthy and flavorful, and all those things tie in together, when that's really what you're focusing on, that just sort of ends up being the end result. So now, since I've kind of experienced that, I definitely have had moments like going to certain restaurants and walking out and being like, I never want to make anybody feel how I feel right now. I never want to do that to anybody. And not because the food wasn't delicious, but just that like heaviness, that physical feeling of just, I don't even know what the actual word is, or if I should say it, but
Food hangover.
it's not good. So I think, when you're really focusing on using seasonal products and using things, and Dan, you could probably talk.
Nice locusts.
Oh yeah.
Nice dog.
And actually, this is something that I wanted to ask you about, but like, the connection between flavor and nutrition, and I think those things are like really, really tied in together. And so,
I do too.
As chefs, when we're talking about we want to use things that are the most flavorful, that's certainly always going to be the most important thing. But when you really start researching that and thinking about it, the things that are the most flavorful usually end up being the things that are most nutritious as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to get too deep into it, but a concept I've been going for with my farming is nutrient density, and that definitely plays a huge role in the way we manage our soil. And there's a lot of cool tools available to farmers now because of research of institutions. There's all this soil science knowledge that wasn't even there, that I was accessing when I started farming, and that just because I've been curious about it and I have a science background, I've looked into it a lot more. And there's not a lot of hard evidence, and I won't pretend to know all about any of this, so please don't assume I'm an expert. But there's not hard evidence that nutrient density and soil health and all of that are connected, but I believe that they are, and I see this in the food that I'm growing right now, because we're growing on a restoration property. It used to be a nursery, and it is like, if I just threw seeds out there and didn't spend the time to figure out what the soil needed and what the ecosystem needed from me, we would not have anything to sell. It's a very tough environment to be growing in, and this is incredibly validating of all the things I've been trying to do with my farming, to hear that our stuff tastes really good and that it makes people feel good. And like, I enjoy eating it myself, and I'd, like to think I have a decent palate. Yeah, I don't know where I was going with that after that, but that's about, I think I've said everything.
So, just a quick question. How are we doing on time? Okay.
Got about
What time is it?
20 minutes left.
All right, perfect.
I'd like to touch
jump right
on
in,
that just
Katy.
a tiny bit, if I can, because it's something that's very important to me. I think that, there's the fact that the kind of foods that we cook and that we put in the forefront is more maybe widely accepted now, affords us the opportunity to cook more personally. Back in the green room, I was joking about putting my heart on a plate, but that's definitely what I do. I think it's what we do. It's what you do. I put my heart on a plate for hundreds of people a day and for all of the social media world to see. But it's because this is food that I really love and that I like to eat, and it's the way I like to eat, and it's very much a personal expression of myself. which I'm not saying isn't true for other chefs, but the fact that we can cook that way and that there's a market for it now is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Like it's amazing that I can have 75% of my menu be not necessarily vegetarian or vegan of any kind, but vegetable focused and vegetable heavy, because that's the way that I personally choose to eat, because it makes me feel good. It's also, I think, in function of our society nowadays and the fact that, you know, there is evidence for sugar being really, really bad for you as opposed to fat being really bad for you. And the focus kind of taking us away from processed food and taking us away from empty calories and the focus being more on nutritionally full and nutritionally valuable food, be that vegetables or meat or eggs that are not factory farmed or whatever it happens to be. But you know, I cook the way I do, and my restaurant is the way that it is because I would want to eat there 4 times a week, you know, and I'm lucky. I'm very lucky that there's actually a market for that. I'm incredibly lucky, but it's the food I want to eat because it makes me feel good. And, you know, we've always said that I wanted Coquine to be an overachieving neighborhood restaurant, an ambitious neighborhood restaurant, because that's very much what I want it to be. I love that people come there for special occasions, but I love that we have people that come there 2 or 3 times a week and that they come and eat our food because, number one, it's delicious, but also because, number 2, it doesn't make them feel like they need to go on a liquid diet for a month after they eat there, you know? I think that's really special, and I think it's what people are looking for. I think it's what the population is actually looking for is places where they don't feel guilty. You know, when we have dessert on the menu and we have our fair share of indulgences for sure, but you can also just come and have a couple of salads and enjoy the sunshine, you know? Yeah. And I think that's really special.
No, I think you totally nailed it. Food that we want to eat on a daily basis, and we're excited about it. And like, I know even like the flatbread that we're doing at Tusk is 100% whole grain flatbread. I eat it literally every day, and I'm never going to get sick of it. And it's even so like, you know, when you...
It's so delicious. If you haven't had it, you have to go have it.
And that was a really big deal for us. But even like, you know, the experience that I'm sure you've had is like when you've been like doing a salad and it's been on the menu for like 3 weeks or whatever, and like you see your cook that's tasted it, you know, 100 times a night, and it's like 3 weeks in, and it's like the end of the shift, and you see them taste it, and they're like, "Oh, that's so good." Yeah, and so awesome. It's not only like us, but it's like the people, the people that we're working with, and it to keep, you know, a cook excited about making the same salad every day over and over again, and tasting it every single time, and still like. The millionth time tasting that salad, being like, "That is fucking good," is like so awesome.
One of my cooks last summer, Shauna, she's as excited as I am,
very excitable.
If not more maybe than I am about vegetables. But she had a hashtag that she used on her social media accounts last summer and said Charente everything, which was like how we all felt about his Charente melons, because we had it in like 3 menu items. And then we made it into popsicles too. Oh, yeah. But it's but that's the way it is your staff gets excited about the fact that there are these beautiful products, these wonderful things, and the fact that when you work seasonally, it's really difficult actually, because all of a sudden then all the Charente melons are gone and like, oh crap, what am I going to do? I'm like, I have this salad and I have to make this year. Then I have to make a new salad, and I have to make a new dessert, and then I have to make a new lunch dessert as well. I mean, and so it's really hard because all these products can get like pulled out from underneath you so quickly, and you have to think quickly on your feet.
I think a lot of times it seems harder in the moment because you're like focused on this actual thing that's not going to be there anymore. But then you like see something else, and you're like, oh, never. Like you kind of like get over the fact that thing's gone, and then you find something else to be excited about.
One of my favorite Coquine dishes ever came out of like our mushroom guy showing up one day, and he didn't have the thing I ordered, and I was like, no. You
don't want to think about it.
You don't want to think about it. And it's like 3 o'clock. Yeah, it's 3 o'clock, and I need a dish by 5 o'clock, and we made a dish like on the fly that day, and that was one of my favorite. So yeah, it's harder, or in theory, it's harder than it actually is, but it keeps people excited. Yeah. It keeps your staff happy, and it keeps people coming back to your restaurant, and it keeps, you know, it's just kind of this infectious, I don't know, excitement and a feeling of being involved in something that's bigger than you are. And maybe I'll stop there.
This whole approach to running a restaurant, where the idea is to make people feel good after they left, they didn't overeat, they are feeling sort of nutritiously satisfied and not bad, like you said, about some experiences. It's like kind of radical, though. I mean, an earlier generation, what we wanted out of a restaurant was to be, to have something delicious, first of all, and to probably to feel full at the end, to feel like you've gotten your money's worth out of the meal. I'm thinking about like an experience like Ringside, which is still a pretty great experience, very, very different from the restaurants we have here. You can go and get a Manhattan and a steak, and you're going to be feeling, like you're a baller, but you might not be feeling 100% great if you ate there every day.
Get Bernays on it.
It's just kind of like a radical approach. I didn't really have a question there, but it feels new.
I think it is new, though. I mean, but like you said, it came from this. I don't know. People wanted it. They wanted an indulgence or to celebrate a special occasion or some reason to spend money and not cook at home. And that, I think that's still kind of true. But the fact of the matter is that, we're the developed nation that spends the least amount of money on food out of all the developed nations in the world. Like, it's ridiculous how little money we actually as Americans want to spend on food. We want everything to be cheap and to come in a big bulk size. And like people, I mean, I see it a lot, and I get it. You have to live within your means, and we can't all buy the $6.50 a pound filet beans at the market because they're beautiful. Like that, they are things that are special. But the fact that now vegetables can be special and not just, again, a canned commodity that you buy, that is really powerful, and that's really refreshing to see. And the fact that we, on our Chef's Choice menu right now, three of the courses are completely vegetarian, and we don't even have any meat. We have a fish course. And I was really nervous about that. That I was super, super nervous about it. Just like I was really nervous the first time our main course on our Chef's Choice menu was a pasta. Like I was very nervous about trying to step away from the paradigm, what people's expectations are that you eat, lighter courses and then a fish course and then a meat course and then dessert. And, one of our dessert courses that we offer is a cheese course that has very little sugar in it. And I was really nervous about throwing that out there and seeing how well it would be received and if we would be able to fill our restaurant. And it's a gamble. I mean, even now, even in Portland now, I think it's, not everybody does it. And I'm not saying that I'm like some radical genius, but I think if you do something well and you put a lot of heart and soul into it, then people feel that and it's translated, and maybe you don't need to do the same thing everybody else is doing. And, people have more of an open mind maybe now about that kind of stuff than they did 5-10 years ago. The fact that maybe the focus of a meal doesn't have to be a piece of meat, and the focus of what they're excited about doesn't have to be this, amazing, huge ribeye steak like at Ringside. But we have that ability now, and we have that power. And the fact that I'm doing that isn't seen as radical. Like, nobody thinks my restaurant's a radical restaurant.
Even Beast, when I was there last in April,
Yeah.
the main was a fish course, which I was not expecting from that particular restaurant.
Isn't it great that we can do that now?
Yeah, it's awesome.
Like,
awesome.
we can do that.
I think we're cooking more everyday food, and that's what we were saying. Like, it's like the food that we want to eat ourselves, and that's like, I literally eat the food that we serve at Tusk every single day, and I don't want Tusk to be the kind of restaurant that is special occasion only, that is, people come to once a year. I want people to come there once a week.
And speaking of like sound financial decisions, I think that, because a restaurant is a business, and if we don't make money, we die. Slow, painful deaths. And, but that's one of the things that we very much took into account. Portland is not a fine dining centric town. It's, for better or for worse, there's not the money here that there is in San Francisco and places, New York, places that have populations that spend more money on food. And so from a restaurant perspective, from a business owner's perspective, you have to make that work. You have to say, okay, I'm going to offer this experience, which may be more special and a little bit more pricey, but the bulk, like the meat of the business we do, we can't count on that being special occasion business. And you know, Twitter execs taking people out to dinner, and it's so, you know, in the same.
You're better off without him. Katy.
I know. But we have to take that into account too, and the fact that the time and place, Portland right now, that, you know, it's probably a little smarter from a business perspective for us to make everyday food rather than just special occasion food.
I had a meal at May last week. It's a pop-up from a chef named Maya Lovelace who does Appalachian food and happens to use a lot of Dan's produce. And one of the dishes
Maya's a good friend of mine.
in
So
this
good.
pretty amazing 10-course menu was a bowl of Dragon's lingerie beans.
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
actually
dude.
gonna talk about those too. Yeah.
And they were
A lot of
tossed.
people have a hard time with that name.
All right,
when
well-
they order from me.
They were tossed in brown butter. There were some marigold petals on top. It was very, very beautiful. And the beans themselves were raw. So I have two questions for you. Can you tell our audience what a Dragon's lingerie bean is?
Yes.
Not the X-rated version
Yes.
of it. And second question, what does it mean to you when you see restaurants like Tusk and Coquine and May serving your produce raw?
So, Dragon's Lingerie Bean is a take on I think it's a dragon's tongue bean, which is the commercially available variety, but it is selected for excellence by one of the other small seed companies that I just love, Uprising Seed. Those guys are up in Bellingham, and every single thing I grow from them is like the best thing that I grow on my farm. And from not just a flavor standpoint, but from a plant health and a production standpoint, it makes my job so much easier. There's like no reason. I compare their stuff with commercial, and I don't use a lot of large commercial seed, but like I've been in the industry for a long time, so I have my standard stuff that I do. And comparing stuff from Uprising against the commercially available varieties that are very similar, it's like night and day. Like obviously I'm gonna buy stuff from these guys. So Dragon's Lingerie is just, I wanna give them a little credit, and I like to give all the seed breeders that I really like some credit because they are making this possible. And there's a lot more awareness now, I think, within a lot of the industries that what I'm in and what the chefs are all in. There's getting in touch with these breeders, and like I'm just facilitating that. Like I know how to grow vegetables, but I mean, I would like to get into plant breeding maybe in my 60s when I'm done hustling so hard. But
So what is
right
this
now I
bean,
just
Dan?
want
Just describe the bean. What does it
So-
look like? What does it taste like?
It's kind of a Romano flat shape. It's got some purple flecking, which is lost when you cook it, which I think is one of the reasons folks like to use it raw.
That and they're just delicious
yeah,
raw.
They're juicy. They're a
Perfect
juicy
as they are.
bean.
They're so
And
good.
Jesse and I are really avid bean pickers, so we really like to get into the qualities of our beans, and I think that we do a good job picking those particular beans. We have a size point that we go for and a maturation point that we go for, which helps. So it's super flattering to have those beans or any of our produce really served raw, because it's sort of, I think it showcases that we have a good understanding of the produce that we're growing, and we pick it at a time that would be appropriate to serve it raw. Of course, unless it's something that, well, I don't know. I'm not going to go there. I won't say that it shouldn't be served raw. It's not my place.
as chefs, is there any kind of pressure on you guys to not? I mean, I would say there probably isn't for you, Sam, because I've eaten at your restaurants. I know you're very comfortable serving things raw.
Mm-hmm.
But is there a larger pressure on you guys to not do a lot of raw stuff? I know I talked to your friend Renee Erickson up in Seattle once.
Mm-hmm.
She told me that she was hearing complaints. Everything was room temperature. Everything was raw. Where's the cooking? Do you guys feel that pressure at all, or it's just that doesn't matter anymore?
No, not
It
ever.
never matters.
Yeah, I don't think it did. But even just like, I don't want to focus too much on the Dragon Lingerie beans, but that's like one of those ones, like when it comes in, literally like the cooks, we're like picking them up and like handing them out to everybody, and people are like eating them and being like, oh my God, this is the best bean I've ever had. And just like seeing that, like that moment in everybody's face is so beautiful, and knowing that like people are excited for you to bring a delivery because we know we're going to get like these fresh beans that everybody's just going to eat. And we do a whole plate at Tusk that's all raw vegetables, and we serve it, with like some whipped feta and herb tahina, but it's just like, it's literally just a plate of raw vegetables, and it's to sort of like have guests when they come in have that same moment that we're having when a farmer brings us something. It's trying to capture this like perfect moment of this vegetable and sort of not really do anything to it and not hide behind it. And I think, maybe some people are like, oh, there's like no technique in that, or it's not really as exciting to do that because you're not doing anything to it. But I think being able to work with the people that are bringing us that stuff, and even being able to ourselves realize those moments and see what is going to be best on that plate and what is going to be the best representation of what we're using.
Katy, you had a pretty memorable snap pea dish that I ate a few times. So similar question to you. Any pressures against serving things raw?
Not to bring up like old blood or this thing that seemed to be this enormous controversy. Do you guys remember the fig on a plate controversy?
Yeah.
Yeah. With, I believe it was David Chang. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. So David Chang came out to California and he said California cuisine is figs on a plate.
He ate at Chez Panisse, actually, very specifically. And they served him a dessert that was raw figs with some perfect, like, fresh mascarpone or something. But it was not. It was just figs on a plate with this wonderful, beautiful cheese, which is delicious. But, they were charging Chez Panisse prices and charging restaurant prices, which they should. They're a restaurant. But there was this backlash from David Chang, who had his reasons for saying what he did, but also kind of like the whole New York culinary community saying that like all we're doing on the West Coast is just like putting vegetables and fruits on plates, and there's no technique.
Grow good vegetables
because we have good vegetables.
That I moved here.
And then there, Daniel Patterson retorted in a New York Times article, and there was this whole big thing. But so I think that what you're hinting at and what you're saying is that that sentiment is there, maybe not so much from the public as from like industry peers and foodies and people who, they are into the next big technique or the next little gadget. Or so I think that idea is kind of there as an undercurrent. But again, as long as you're serving a really perfect vegetable with a sauce that is absolutely delicious, or seasoned in a way or presented in a way that is still beautiful and inspiring, then we don't have that problem. I don't have that problem.
I would just say, like, at least for me, because there is so much more accessibility to good ingredients for people, it's on the daily basis, that I do feel like a little bit more responsibility to like do something more than what people can just go to a farmer's market and get for themselves. But I think, but still, it's
well, there's the snap pea salad that you're talking about. It's sugar snap peas that are very quickly blanched, and a maple mustard vinaigrette with.
Are we even going to go there right now?
We don't need to go there yet. I'll plug it at the end.
Oh, sorry. Well, I'm going to plug it because it is the most delicious maple syrup I've ever tasted in my life. A maple syrup from that he brings in from Vermont, from Jesse, right? Jesse's farm?
It's Jesse. Jesse's involved deeply, but it's a very close friend of ours who we farmed with in Vermont now has an amazing sugar bush, and one of the oldest in southern Vermont, that he, through a lot of good luck, is now able to sugar, and we bring in that maple syrup.
It's delicious. It's
the best maple syrup I've ever had.
Me too. And I didn't grow up in Vermont, far from it, but I've eaten a lot of maple syrup, and it's complex. You can taste things. It's not just sweet. Anyway, so with the maple mustard vinaigrette, mustard greens that he grows, probably for a large part because I want them.
They're for you.
And Marcona almonds that we treat in a special way. I'm not gonna give that secret out, but it's just a salad. It's just mustard greens with this vinaigrette and sugar snap peas and some almonds, and it can seem, and it was on our Chef's Choice menu for a long time, and can seem very plain and very, very. It's just a salad, but people would say when at our restaurant, every time someone has a chef's choice menu, I take the candy tray out to them at the end and ask them how was dinner, and I really mean it. Like I really want to know if people enjoyed their meals, or if they didn't, what they didn't enjoy, or what have you. But every single time for that month and a half span, people would say to me, "Oh my God, that salad." I'm like, "What do you mean that salad?" But it's so simple, and yet if you put things together in the right way, and if you treat ingredients the right way, and you just make them, you don't have to do much to them. Again, I mean, we just dress the greens, and we very quickly blanch the peas, and then we cut them in half, and so many. I think a lot of people are surprised that can be delicious, and that can be inspiring, and that can be dinner.
All right. Well, we've talked about figs a couple times. We've talked about snap peas. We've talked about Dragon's lingerie beans. I think maybe it's time to wrap it up. Just one more shout out to Dan Sullivan from Black Locust Farms in East County.
Sorry, just one, no S. Just one farm.
Oh yeah, that's right. I looked
Sorry.
that up today. Black Locust Farms.
So
that's not just like a stylistic thing that actually references when people have multiple farms. I see it both ways.
I think that I see a lot of large scale farms having multiple farms because they have like a centralized business and they're renting multiple farms, but we only have one farm currently. Although I would love to have multiple farms to work. It's nice to
Someday,
have different
man.
properties because they all grow vegetables differently.
Katy Millard is from Coquine on Mount Tabor. It's a fantastic restaurant. If you haven't been there, please go there tonight or tomorrow or
Come.
Friday,
We'd
Saturday.
love to cook for you.
And Sam just has a new baby, Tusk. It's about under a month old.
3 weeks. Yeah.
Oh, 3 weeks old, a little newborn. And like with most newborns, he's probably not sleeping much. So thanks especially to you for coming out here for this. So great,
All
guys.
together.
And that's on East Burnside near 24th. And you're on Belmont near 68th.
At 69th and Belmont.
69th. And I just want to thank everyone else for coming. Really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
I love the Eagles.
Hell yeah.
Eagles are good.
Eagles of death metal.